Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Crown Zenith, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are going to be looking at the Orlando Regional Championship results. This was a 1,485 player tournament. Insane for regional championships, the largest ever that we've had. This is basically the numbers we were expecting to see for the likes of previous NAICs. So yeah, the game continues to grow and it seems to be very popular right now, and everyone is wanting to accumulate those championship points. Of course, this is the only way you can get CP at the moment outside of ICs, so that might be a contributing factor. But this is the first tournament that we had to experiment with Crown Zenith. I know it says Silver Tempest up here, and that's actually probably more accurate because there's only been a handful of cards from Crown Zenith. But yeah, this is the first time we can use some of those new cards. I'm mostly interested in looking at a lot of the lost boxes to see how many incorporated the likes of Zamazenta, which I'm quite hyped on, or the likes of Sky Sealstone as well, with some V packages going on in the deck. But it seemed to be the Lugia show this weekend, so we have a lot of Lugias to look at. Andrew Hendrick was able to win the entire event with their Lugia list, with a couple interesting tech cards in here as well. You can see straight away that the Lugia count itself is quite thin. The 3-2 line is choosing to play one Capturing Aroma over the typical 3-3 that we oftentimes see. The Aroma gives you a bit of flexibility here and there, I suppose. But there are times where this can go wrong, of course, just based on how you flip. But that's up to you. I still prefer a 3-3 personally, just for prizing issues and whatnot, because there are many situations now where you will attempt to go double V-Star. With so many lists just choosing to play one choice belt and such, you can actually stay out of range of things with your V-Star in a number of matchups. So I'm a bigger fan of the 3-3, but that's just it, really. Outside of that, the Pokemon line is pretty much exactly as expected. I think the only question mark is seeing no Dunsparce in here, but choosing to not play that card, which is completely reasonable. We are seeing the Irida package incorporated here that's become popular, although they're not playing Cancelling Clone. That's kind of one of the biggest reasons to play the Irida package, so you can try and get the answer to an Aerodactyl when you need it, or other things like Wheezing, even Duraludon it can help out with. But choosing to play Echoing Horn instead, a pretty interesting include. It can give you some amazing shot value, it can give you extra Gust 2 prize value as well, which can be good in Mirror, and that's why we're seeing the 2 Boss, 2 Serena in here as well, so trying to bump up those counts once again to make sure that you just have the Echoing Horn options to take multiple 2 prize knockouts, which is obviously good in Mirror, can be good against other things as well. So yeah, pretty reasonable include for sure. And I think it can also help out against things like Duraludon in more of a soft answer, where you're bringing back like arcs to hit and you essentially ignore the VMAX or try to for as long as you can. And you still have the Vacuum as a fallback for Amazing Destruction, so you're not completely disregarding it altogether. The other real interesting thing is the energy count. I really like V-Guard with the amount of Lugia Mirror there is right now, so I do think that's a very solid choice. But also Wash Water is a little mini tech card that we've been seeing pop up a little bit. The idea being that you can wash water your Manaphy, denying a Sableye from sprinkling the Manaphy, and then you're protecting yourself quite well against the Lost Box players who are trying to use Kyogre or trying to use Raikou at certain points in the game. So a bit of a Lost Box tech. I think for the amount of hype that Lost Box was receiving going into Crown Zenith, it makes sense. I still feel Lost Box was kind of, well, it was well represented at the tournament, it just didn't have a great showing. I think that's an indication that people are experimenting with new Lost Box lists and haven't cracked it just yet. I'm personally thinking that for OCIC, some people will make better strides with Lost Box as we continue onwards. That's not to say that Lugia won't continue to be the best deck, because I think it will be. But yeah, this is a really solid list. I think the question marks really are Cancelling Clone, whether you prefer it to Echoing Horn or not, and the Aroma versus Lugia debate, which this was actually a big card in the finals. There was a really important coin flip at one point, so if you want to go back and watch that, you can. But yeah, pretty reasonable list overall. We have Bradner coming in at second place, also incorporating that 3-2 Lugia line. People really are just trying to squeeze out as much space as they can from the list. Bradner playing the same Pokemon counts, except for adding in the Dunsparce as well. And instead of having the Irida or Birdkeeper package, it's going back to the 3 Research 3 Marnie split. I know it's something their team has been on a few times throughout the season. in the Silver Tempest meta. Is also adding in a Speed Lightning Energy as an extra flavor in here to try and get the most use out of your single prize Pokemon, which is an interesting choice. And it's playing 2 Vacuum, 2 Belt. So doubling up on belts, that's kind of interesting. I still feel 1 is pretty okay, and just turn one of these spaces into that search supporter, personally. But you do have extra coverage from like research and whatnot. And in fairness, with so much Lugia Mirror around, and V-Guard possibly becoming more popular because they've been in some of the most successful lists that we've seen today already in the 2 finalist 60s, and there's going to be in more, I imagine. Just having instant access to Belt allows you to go like 3 powerful plus Belt on Lugia and respond on a V-Guarded Lugia. That can be huge sometimes, so double Belts, now that we're going back towards a V-Guard meta, was probably a pretty astute call, to be fair, so I can't hate on it too much. And it's double Lost Vacuum. That's an interesting one, choosing not to play a Stadium and just having the 1 Vacuum, 1... Sorry, yeah, rather than having 1 Vacuum, 1 Collapse that we've seen previously. So maybe preparing for other things. Can't really tell what this is for over just playing an extra Stadium when you don't play any Search Supporter. Is there any tool that I'm that worried about? Not particularly, right? I wonder what this Vacuum is for. Maybe it's trying to just get rid of other belts in like mirror situations if they come down early. That's like the only upside that I'm seeing. I can't see it being massive in many other situations. Because obviously, like, you have the utility with Amazing Destruction, but if you just wanted that, you would also play the Irida and save a space, I would imagine. So they're choosing to actively play 2 outs to, like, Path or whatever, as well as the Pump. But this could just be a Collapse, and I think you're more of a well-rounded deck. That's an interesting one. I mean, a lot of people have tried to cheat that space, right? Turn Vacuum Belts into, like, 1 supporter plus the Cologne or something. So that's an interesting debate there. Answers on a postcard of why it's double Vacuum and not just 1 and 1 Stadium in that instance. We have the lone Lost Box in the top 8 from Nick Moffat with a really interesting build, definitely adapting the Rayquaza list that we've come to know, because it's incorporated, if you can believe it, a 6th flavor of energy into the deck, and it's a Wash Water energy. So the Wash Water allows you to create a board state of lone Ice Cube in Mirror, as well as against Regis, which is pretty insane. It almost takes a similar role as the lone flying Pikachu Parasol that we saw Sander incorporate in his control list, where rather than mucking about with loads of stuff in the mirror, you have this option of just like netting everything up, going Wash Water Gate Ice Cube, Block Face, what do you do? Which I think is maybe risky, and maybe it's not something you do too often, but it's certainly an issue for people. Like, there's no doubt that that could just be a backdoor win con. I think it's probably still too much, personally. Like, yes, Lost Box Mirror, they have no hand disruption, so you have time to sort of create this strategy, but I would also just argue that, especially when you're already playing, like, double Manaphy, you're already, like, tech for Mirror in that sort of direction, that you could just play more switch cards and play like Lost Vacuum and get to 7 quicker and just be more reliable. Like, even a Capture Energy gives you some percentage in Mirror because it just is an extra consistency card. And I've played a lot of this deck. This is the deck I've been playing the most for the last like 3 or 4 weeks, and it's on that consistency tightrope. There's no doubt about it. So shoving in these extra pieces feels so weird. If I was going to do something like this with Wash Water and Ice Cube as well, I'd honestly just think about cutting Raikou and going back to like Water Energy and just have Shuriken as an option. Just have more Water Energy at my disposal, because then the Wash can at least be used on Greninja as well. Bit of a weird one. There may be other applications where you wash your Manaphy and stuff in Mirror as well, so it doesn't have to be like an Ice Cube Block Face. It could just be, I'm going to put this Manaphy down and wash it, knowing that it's typically like 1 boss in Lost Box. So then yours is safe basically the whole game, and it's not this sort of like, I have to recycle this inevitably. It then becomes a case of, the Manaphy's here, that's staying, and now I'm going to try and target your Manaphy the whole game, and I'll eventually find a window to use Amazing Shot. So there could also be that reason to play Wash even without Ice Cube. And honestly, the Ice Cube's so weird. I feel like the Wash Manaphy is probably good enough in Mirror the more I think about it. And this deck is already fine into Regis, because you have Zigzagoon Raikou. Yeah, I think the ice is probably a space, but I don't hate the wash just for a mana fee play. You can see these are my raw reactions. I haven't looked at all of these things. We have Cal Connor playing a Birdkeeper, Double Belt, and V-Guard, and a Washwater as well. So the Washwater coming in here. So in 3 of the top 4 lists we've seen so far, I've played Washwater. That's something you wouldn't have expected, or certainly I didn't expect. This is definitely mirror conscious, right? It's playing the 2 Belt, the 1 V-Guard, and it's still choosing to play the Birdkeeper, which is definitely reasonable. I think if you're not committing to the Cologne as well, it doesn't make sense to play the Serena just for these 2 targets. So the Birdkeeper does come in and make sense, and maybe some respect to some control as well. I think Cal was saying that he was close to playing control himself, if I remember a tweet correctly. So definitely aware of control being a thing, so wanting to play the Birdkeeper for some extra protection sounds very reasonable. So yeah, this is a very good list. I think nothing out of place. Cal's always one of these people that can squeeze the most out of a 60. We see Reagan in the top 8. Another list of Lugia. Is this different to Bradner's? No, it's not. So we have the same list 3 times in top 8, and this is the one I've questioned the most about the counts. That's pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, look at the success of this 60 is absolutely incredible. So I probably just need to say well done. So that's also John's 60, another top 8 for them. I mean, just look at their Lugia success. It's absolutely insane. They've piloted it this whole time. Such high placements with the Bediff. Pretty insane. Then we have Austin also in Lugia. It's gonna be a short video, huh? This time it's playing Drapion, not something you see too often. It's playing Birdkeeper and Skylar, and just 1 Marnie. 1 Marnie feels so weird, because I think you're losing percentage points into Lost Box if you only play 1 copy. And possibly even into the mirror, because it's something you can try and panic play. This is playing the 1 Luminion, which then means it's Skylar rather than Irida, which is kind of the Tord approach. I still like Double Fish, personally, so I'm more on the Irida side of things. But yeah, this just seems to have added the extra Mon. Or, well, I guess the Drapion for Luminion, and then the Skylar / Birdkeeper comes in over the 2nd Marnie. Kind of the space is being made here. But otherwise, looking pretty good. And then we have the really wacky Mew from Grant with the Aerodactyl V-Star coming in, a 1/1 package, as well as some really interesting tools being selected here. So the Aerodactyl, of course, is meant to come in to play against Lugia whenever you go first, or if you think you can create a window of opportunity with Path Judge early, and you can just rip that Ancient Star and completely just deny Summoning Star, and then you obviously run away with the game. My beef with Aerodactyl is that I think you're pretty good going first into Lugia already as Mew. I think you can tempo out quite well, especially if you play Echoing Horn, which this one, it's making spaces for other ways to beat Lugia, so there's no reason to. But I think Echoing Horn's just like a better catch-all card into other matchups as well, like Arcdura and such. So, and even like Gudra Lost Box, which is climbing in popularity. So I think Aerodactyl's still too niche, and like it's usually a card that's only good if you're going first into Lugia where you're fine already. And you always have the backdoor of like, well, I can at least panic judge and path them, which was already a thing you could always do. So I think it's a real copium choice, to be honest. I really don't. I think it's flashy and just not that good. Is my hot take on it. The Leafy Camo Poncho I'm also not a huge fan of. Like, maybe it lets you more aggressively continue to chain Techno Blast without having to worry about, do I need to Psychic Leap something back into the deck? But also sacrificing your choice belts is so strange, because there is still Lugia and you still want to have that big push turn. I suppose because you just have such a different game plan against Lugia, you don't need to worry about knocking out their stuff so quickly, and you're happy to like 2-shot into them as they turn attach throughout the game. So maybe that's just a decision again based on this list. But I think in general you're going to be wanting to still play those those choice belts. Is making the space for Rotom Phones, which I am a fan of. I have been a massive fan of Rotom Phones just in the list in general, just to get things to come together. So yeah, maybe a little hint of something there. I do like the double phone at the very least, although 1 Forest Seal Stone also feels weird. So that could be a flip-flop, and then you play the 1 A-Spec phone. Hello. I also really like playing no customs in Judge Mew, because I think customs clog you up so much when you already have cloggy paths, cloggy vacuums, and other stuff like this. So it's cool to see a non-cross-switcher DTE Mew doing well, because it's something that I definitely back also. So there are some hints there, but obviously the space that's taken up by the Aerodactyl I'm just kind of not really on board with. So the story wasn't really so much the top 8. There was also a few on the bubble. Another Lugia on the bubble, Ian Robb's Palk Intel with the Articuno package, as well as Ice Cube Wash and Crab and Drapion, that sort of stuff going on. This is literally just the deck that's meant to checkmate a few scenarios. Like the Articuno Jelly quick shooting is meant to try and do that checkmate against the Lugia players. The Ice Cube Wash, scoop up net everything, and even to an extent Thornton can be a way to checkmate with Blockface against Reggies and against Lost Box. And you're meant to just win a prize race by playing Drapion and having Palkias at your disposal, essentially, against Mew. So it's like, it's playing 3 different decks in one deck. You're really just trying to target the top lists in the game. There's been so much Wash Water and even a good amount of Ice Cube in the top 10 decks. I wouldn't be surprised if Lost Box started going back to Sinnoh, because it seems to be that everyone is just going, I want to cheese my way around Lost Box rather than actually try and play a game against them, which is pretty reasonable. That continues the theme in the Lost Box that was played by a number of top NA players, this testing group with Azul, Grant, Danny, Isaiah Williams here, who was the highest placing finisher. An adaptation of Sanders 60, taking out the Speed Lightnings and the Flying Pikachu package and having Wash Water Ice Cube package instead. Ice Cube kind of lower to the ground, which is cool. You can actually just proactively put an Ice Cube down and a Wash Water down on the board, like quite often against Lost Box in the opening stages, so you can just get into a block face very quickly against them. That was the biggest thing when I was testing Sanders' latest 60. The Flying Pikachu takes so long to come online because you oftentimes need to be using Starly, you need to be finding turn attachments elsewhere around the board and whatnot, so just a big commitment. Whereas the Ice Cube Wash seems like it's much easier to just put into play and say, hey, I found Ice Cube Wash Water, let's see how they react to this first one, because I already have Thought and I already have multiple Wash Waters. I may as well try and represent this again later. So I think that's pretty cool, especially with Cape. Like a caped Ice Cube with a Wash on it in the opening stages, you don't even need to formulate this crazy Thornton package. You can just twin and find your nets at that stage. So yeah, it seems like a very scary combination. Again, it's like the cat's out of the bag now. I don't think it's going to work again in future because Lost Boxes have to adapt. Then again, Lost Boxes may still not have many easy answers. It may be just soft things like Echoing Horn going into Lost Boxes to try and deal with this, where you can Horn, Rope, and knock out Blockface. But that's still a big combination that could take a long time. And just sitting there block facing could actually just win you a prize race, honestly, while they wait. Which is kind of interesting, especially with like Galamines and stuff slowing down their Confey usage and whatnot. So yeah, very good adaptation, I think, for this weekend again. Also, there's that sort of issue of, because Sander played the Pikachu package last event, people may have been teching for the Pikachu, but then weren't teching for Ice Cube. So it's like they did the flip-flop. They may flip-flop again at OCIC. Like the Flying Pikachu could be the right way to play it next tournaments, or the Ice Cube. So it's one of those finger on the pulse situations where, do Lost Box players want to tech for both? Can they tech for both? Do they have the space for that sort of thing? Or do they have to just sort of have catch-all style cards in their deck? Or do they just shrug and say, well, I guess they're going to do this. And it's a matchup I'm willing to take a bad one into. But yeah, this seems like, you know, it has the more solid game plans, I think, against Mew and Lugia, just because Crowd Destruction is such a strong combination. And the Ice Cube Wash seems easier to do than Flying Peak, but it's also easier to counter for the Lost Box players. It's not like a guaranteed checkmate, because your board state relies on you having a lone Ice Cube, and that's just so easy to like get around at some point. I suppose you could try and catch things like Sinnoh with Sydney at times while they accumulate that combo. So there are issues with Temple of Sinnoh being the tech choice. But just things to bear in mind. Lots more Lugia in the top 16. Another Rayquaza Lost Box in top 16. We haven't seen any new cards from Crown Zenith so far. Just a quick note there. Also a Goodra in that top 16 as well. I think Gudra was pretty good for its representation in this tournament. This one's actually playing a Cheryl, which is really interesting. I didn't expect that, but yeah, you can do a Cheryl Gate attach play. It's like a second Moisture Star. So gross. That's just nasty. Also playing the 1 Parasol for some extra protection. Pretty cheeky. There was 1 Ditto control as well in day 2. This is trying to encompass all sorts of little basic attackers, and Mew stitches it all together with its sudden transformation. It can use all of these sorts of things. So we got everything from searching our deck for 2 cards. This is essentially like a higher hit point Starly. We have Torment to stop certain attacks, or decks that only have 1 attack on their main attacker, and you just Torment to make them retreat around. You've got forcing things into the active and confusing. That seems pretty annoying. We've got the Mill from Sandisle, making people actually play the game. It's kind of cool. You've, of course, got Yveltal, and Miltank you'll use itself, I think. So, yeah, pretty interesting. It's like another way to... You still have the Yveltal package, but then you also have, like, proactive gusting and stuff all inbuilt on your attacks. So you're a bit more flexible in Sanders' build, like, on the offset against things like Lugia and Mew. And I guess you still have the same package that you would try and do. You're trying to Ice Q and scoop up net and use Calyrex to help get you there. So I think it's much of a muchness, really. Just a different way of going around it by not having... you don't have the Eldegoss end game. Your end game is... Well, you have Yeld's Cheer and Silene and Palpad, so you have a little bit of infiniteness. But I suppose as soon as you get your opponent out of resources, you're going, right, it's time to use this little chap to win the game, which is kind of cool. And proactively mill your way to win, rather than actually just being infinite, I suppose. I'm trying to find a Lost Box that's different, that actually has new cards involved. Is this going to be a Sky Seal Stone? No, this is a Forest Seal Stone. I did look at the data, and I did see some new cards. Yeah, so Kika played a pretty interesting list with Zamazenta, a Sky Seal Stone package, and the Kyogre. The Kyogre, of course, can get you lots of prize cards in the mirror, especially if you can Cologne Boss the Manaphy and surge like a 3 or 4 prize card turn, which is kind of crazy. It's probably too glamorous, this list, let's be honest. It's trying all the new tricks and even trying like Cologne and stuff in a deck that again is already like kind of clunk. I also feel that Sky Seal Stone is so strange when you don't play Raihan. I thought that would be like a given, and Raihan's just decent in this list anyway as a one-of. Anyway, so it just feels so strange. But this is playing the Temple though, so knew about the Ice Cube technology. Was at least ahead on the game there. I wanted to look at the deck statistics just while we look at it. So lots of Lugia, 35% essentially in day 2 of the decks, which is just insane conversion. Still a decent amount of Lost Box and Mew, but Lost Box converted quite poorly into day 2 for how much it was played. Whereas Lugia converted very well from how much it was played in day 1. It was actually sub 30% of the day 1 field, but then back up to 35% in day 2, and then obviously littered the top 16 and top 8. And yeah, Gudra's hanging on in there. Gudra is making life harder for Reggie, so it's not too surprising to see it on that sort of lower count of things. Eldegoss doing pretty well as well. But just quickly to look at the Lost Boxes here. There was still a decent amount of Zamazenta being played, not quite the 1 count. This is across all the Lost Boxes, so that the 11 deck list that we have. So this is breaking down like... I think it's best in Kyogre Lost Box, so it doesn't surprise me that these percentages are similar here in how much play it's seeing, but still not a huge amount. Oh, someone played a Crab? Was someone playing a Sky Seal Stone Crab combo? Crazy. And then the Sky Seal Stone is bang on the same amount of play that the Zamazenta saw. I still think there's a lot to go with Zama. I've been playing a lot of Kyogre with Zama, and I think it's a really good combination of cards. It saves you space compared to Snorlax, and I just think that's insane. And Zamazenta's a better like catch-all card because retaliates damage at that 220 is so much better than the threat of a 180 from a Thump. It gives you better like rope plays that are just like more flexible and more early in the game. So I'm still a big fan of Kyogre Zam. I think it could again see play. But those people who are playing Lost Box are putting in so much more work than any other player in the game because it just has so many more decisions inbuilt. So it wouldn't surprise me to still see Lugias littering the OCIC. But yeah, that's my initial thoughts on Orlando. I think a lot. Well, no one's surprised to see this much Lugia, right? We've seen it before, but it seems like more people were teching Ice Cues and Wash Waters and like Lost Box answers than Lugia answers, which actually was correct. It was the right thing to do based on how much percentage Lost Box took up of day one. So I'm sure it helped a lot of people get to that day two, but then it's when you're getting to these latter rounds, it's like, oh yeah, I still need to be the best deck in the format. And it feels like people didn't necessarily forget that, but their techs were catered towards Lost Box that little bit more. But I do think that Lugia's going forward very well served playing V-Guard and possibly back up to double choice belt. And yeah, this Wash Water technology, I need to test it into Lost Box. The Wash Water Manaphy, I think, could be a headache as well for the Raikou Rays. So something to think about. I'll hear it all down below. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll be back for another video tomorrow. Cheers.